Good morning, Mike. Happy Monday. How you doing?
Hey, Steve. Good. I'm very well rested. A 3-day weekend, a holiday weekend. A little different than the usual Easter weekend celebrations, but still a good one. How about you? How you doing?
No, very much the same, man. The 3-day weekend, I think a lot of people were concerned. We're concerned about, having that time together, 3 days away from work and not being able to function. But actually, it was really easy. It was really good.
Yeah, for me, I definitely relaxed a lot more than I usually do on the weekends. I think there was some good news.
Oh, for
Again,
sure.
not to get too ahead of ourselves, but there are some trends out there, some change in tone. I mean, did you see it? You did your normal cursory review of the news, and also Europe, right? You have some updates from Europe that I have not had a
Yeah,
chance to
no, I
check in
do, I
on.
do, and absolutely, we'll get into that. But I just want to sort of, ask the people who are listening, who are watching, whether you're watching live, whether you're watching as a recording, do subscribe to the channel. It helps the channel, helps us grow, helps us share the message. Like, share, ask questions of us, right? If you're in the live comments, ask a question, or if you're watching it read back, it later in the day, do ask questions, leave comments, and sort of help us sort of structure this because this isn't a podcast. This isn't two guys sort of preaching, so to speak. This is a talk show, right? This is you and I sharing what we're seeing, what we're hearing in the marketplace, and just kicking
Wait,
our
it's not
days
just
off with
not the two of us just talking, like a couple of friends,
just a
workplace
couple of dudes,
friends,
man. Just a couple
couple
of
of
dudes,
dudes.
just nothing else to do in the morning. So we thought, hey, let's get on here and have a little chit chat.
I like it.
But yeah,
I
so
like
please
it. But no, I would love to have
do,
more
of
folks part
course.
of the conversation. Hashtag OSW Daily.
There you go. There you go. And if you don't want to leave comments here, feel free to send us an email, oswdaily@gmail.com, and you can send your questions to us or comments to us in private. What I find, Mike, is we're a very introverted community, even though we're a very outgoing profession, but
That
we're
is
quite
true. That
introverted,
is true. And I know there are people watching because I hear again outside
No,
the public
absolutely.
channels. So it's pretty cool to know
It
that
is.
is
It is. It is.
we are reaching
But
people
uh,
and have that conversation.
But yeah, going back to the initial question you had, the amount of positive things, yeah, it's the amount of death is it's horrible. It's just
Mm.
it's there's no words to describe, but the positive news coming out are there's less and less people testing positive. There's less and less people, going into hospitals that are getting into ICU units, which is all positive. And I was astounded this morning to learn that in Spain, construction workers are going back to work today.
I did not hear that.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah, so
interesting.
they're considered non-essential, but yet they've been allowed to go back to work, permitted to go back to work. Now, I don't know if this is the entire the entire country. I don't know if this is for every type of market. I don't know how this works, but in essence, it's just positive news, right? That
Yeah.
the wheels are starting to turn,
Yeah. Did you notice that
which
shift in the
good.
tone over the weekend? The talk
Oh
seems
yeah,
to be about this getting back to some new normality. I'll use that term because normalcy I've read is an Americanism that is not really based on any kind of proper English, but it's very commonly used. I use it all the time. But whatever normalcy or normality is going forward is something I'm interested in talking about, and I've been trying to talk about it in a delicate way in recent weeks because I'm always looking for that vision, right? What we do when we get back to work, and how as workplace leaders we help manage those situations in our organization, give people the mindset and the comfort to return to public spaces. And we still have no idea what the future looks like really in many ways, but we are starting to have that conversation, and we're starting to see it in other parts of the world that have had to go through this journey already. So we're going to learn a lot. And I want to hear your thoughts on this because you said your mindset had shifted, and up until now you were the person in this two-way dialogue that was very conservative about the fact that it's going to be a long time before you're comfortable getting out into the public, going back to the built environment, back into your workplace, due to the health risks and so forth. But has that shifted? Has some of the conversation stimulated thought, or what are you looking for that's going to help you get more potentially optimistic about going back into the workplace?
Yeah, I think it's something every individual has to ask themselves, right? And I think organizations will allow individuals to make those decisions, and there are going to be those that are cooped up in small apartments who just are craving to go back to the
Mm.
workplace. But for me, I still stand firm on sort of my position. Given health, I have to feel that I either have the antibodies or I'm tested or or in some way I feel safe, that I won't put myself in harm's way, or that I won't put other people in harm's way because of me being out in the social environment. And that's sort of where my head is, you know. But as you sort of think through, you take that your question, right, and you kind of evolve it a little bit, right? So what would it take for us to get back to the office? I don't know if you saw, I think it was Thursday or Friday, Cushman and Wakefield released the 6 Foot Office
I
website. So if
did.
you wanted to go
I
to
did.
www.6feetoffice.com, and
Yep.
it's really interesting. You know, there's my initial response is, here's a brokerage firm telling us all we need more space, you need to go and lease more space, and you know, but I don't think that's the spirit where it came from. I think they see a problem, and I think they're trying to provide a solution, and that's what I kind of think it is. And I sort of thought about that. I've been pondering, what would the 6 feet office look like? I don't know about you, Mike, but if you, I sort of vision, the way I sort of think through, the way my mind process works is, what's it like for me to walk into an office, right? So I walk off an elevator. What are my habits, right? I go in, I go to the bathroom, wash my hands, I go
Yep.
through the doors into the office, I pass people, I say good morning to the team, I get to my desk, I maybe go make a cup of coffee. You know, you go to the fridge, you hit the button, you get some water. How do you get the water out of the machine? How do you get back to your desk? You know, maybe you've got a meeting planned that morning, so you got to print off materials. You got to
Mm,
go to that meeting room. How do you walk into that meeting room? How do you interact with those meeting rooms? How do
so
you
many
exit
things.
the meeting room? And, you know, then where do you go for lunch? How do you do those things? You know, so my mind goes through, how do you do all these things? How do you ensure, you know, people are feel safe and are secure, are secure and feel secure in that environment, you know? And if you think about it from the employee's perspective, or as a workplace leader, what we need to do for our employees to sort of give them that level of comfort. And you know what Cushman and Wakefield have done is provided some things that actually are quite interesting in the concepts, right? So you know, you go in and you've got directional flow of traffic, so maybe everyone walks in the same direction around the office floor.
Right. Right.
You know, the little pads, and they did a video. I don't know if you saw the video, Mike.
I did. Yeah.
It's pretty cool how sort of it looks, and we can sort of get to the barriers of what that looks like. We're trying to focus here on, obviously at this moment in time, on the what it looks like in the office.
Well, I like how
And
people
I,
are thinking about it and then
oh,
coming up
for
with
sure.
strategies because,
Hmm.
and if we take a step back, I mean, back to the bigger picture, the big conversation shift here on April 13th. Where are we? Monday, April 13th, the weekend. We had a lot of almost return to debate about things that we weren't even thinking about a few weeks ago. You know, we were totally, putting health and our well-being, and I properly so, that people came before profit, and we all agreed that really shutting the economy down was the only way to prevent this pandemic from really spreading so rapidly and overwhelming our healthcare system. So we all agreed to that. Well, now, and it took a while though to get there. I kind of think back to the beginning of this, and now that you're starting to see this kind of two streams of thought I see on the news now, people wanting to go back and relitigate the decision making. It's like, let's point fingers and say who did what, who knew what, when. And I don't find that particularly useful and helpful. I think there was enough, you know, kind of unknown and just different decisions were being made. And I agreed at the beginning of my new live stream and my discussions about this, that I wouldn't get political, that, hey, imperfect information leads to imperfect decision making. And we were certainly lacking data. We still are lacking data. But now I think shifting as more data comes in about the situation we're in and what we are dealing with here going forward in the coming months, we can start making some decisions, at least start thinking about them. So that's what I liked about this shift, is that people were starting to make these thoughts, or kind of plan out some strategies. The Cushman Wakefield video is one thing. A lot of articles. There are a lot of articles about what does reopening the economy look like, and then getting down to what does reopening the office look like. But that big picture, I think, is the key takeaway for me. And I want to hear from you.
Mm.
It's that idea that it's different for every situation, from governmental. You've got here in the US, we'll speak specifically, the federal government has certain power and authority, but states have a lot of authority in our uh, in our form of government. We have states' rights. We have the governors make a lot of decisions that the federal government can't make. So it's a two-way street when there's a lot of people wanting, direction from the government, or resources from the government, and then they have to make decisions at the local level as well. It's the same way in corporate America. There's big business, small business, and then of course locations across the country in different areas require different responsibilities, and get all the way down to the individual. You and I and our colleagues have different comfort levels and different health situations and different vulnerabilities and different mindsets about how we do this. So I love the fact that there's at least a theme I'm seeing, that there's not going to be one size fits all. There's no flipping the switch on May 1st or June 1st or whenever and turning things back on the way they were. It's going to be something new, something different, and it's going to be a gradual situation that requires from the top down all the way through the government and through the organization decision making to help put the people first, and then the economy is certainly a priority as well. But I think we need to continue to put people first, let people make decisions, be flexible, and decide what's best for them, and wherever that's possible. I'm getting with this kind of like this, take
Yep.
that broad mindset and put it into our organizations, and then use technology and use the resources we have, the available, innovation that we have and will have, because we don't even know about some of the things we'll have in the coming months, and make us all come together. So I, again, hopeful, optimistic guy, sees that at least is the beginning visionary type perspective that can get us through this to the other side and bring us back to a good place.
Yeah, and I think there's more and more narrative around innovation, right? What are we going to do to innovate? This weekend, as you know, Google, Apple are coming together to be able to allow
Yeah.
us to track each other, right? So to track, when I say track each other, I mean allow us all to feel safe and
Yeah.
secure that whether we've been exposed or not exposed to a virus. Yes, there'll
Will
be a
you
lot of
opt
people who
in?
have
Will you opt
there'll be a
into
lot of
that?
people who have privacy issues.
Yeah.
It's a tough one where yeah, it's a tough one, and I mean that in a sense of there is a social responsibility each of us have to the other person, right? And from that perspective, yes. Then there's the privacy element, right? And how do we feel about privacy? Now, both organizations have come out and publicly said that this is not about tracking all your movements using Bluetooth technology, which is whenever two people pass each other, there's a ding and there's
Right.
a tracking mechanism attached to that. So I think from an individual, from a social responsibility, then I think I almost have to opt in. But then I think organizations are almost required to reassure the public that we're not tracking you. This isn't a social tracking mechanism so that, we can sell you better advertising and things like that. People need to feel that level of comfort. What's your perspective? How do you feel about it?
I was immediately like, I thought it was a great idea, and I thought, yeah,
Yeah.
I'd join and want to have that information, whether for to help others, like you say, or just to know myself. I think I'm one who wants to know. Give me as much data as possible. I want to make wise decisions, and I want to be able to put things in perspective, and that's what's hard too. And I want to get back to the workplace and the 6-foot office, what that might look like,
Yep.
because that's an interesting conversation. Because part of me um, gets upset imagining some of that, because there's a loss. There's that, going way back to the very first episode we had, or 2-3 weeks ago when we first started talking, this idea of grieving the loss of
Mm.
the old normal, whatever that was for you, and it covered so many things. So I want to get to a place where I can see how it looks and then live it out. So here's an example. Just and I know you don't leave your home anymore, right? You're being very cautious. You don't even have food delivered. Is that still the case? So you're not
Still the
exposing
case.
yourself.
Still the case.
I went out over the weekend for the first time out. Besides the grocery store, I usually, have, and this is the first time I've been out since the wearing a face mask became the new guidance. So I put a buff on, a bandana, and went to Home Depot. And I walked in, and Home Depot had I want to say social distancing, physical distancing protocols in place, where everybody was lined up out front 6 feet apart, and they were letting people in a staggered way to go into the store, get what you need, and then check out. And I'd say it was early. It was a day or two after the guidance came out about everybody should wear a face mask, not to help themselves be protected necessarily, but to help others. You want to, if everybody does it, we're all helping each other. So I saw maybe 2/3 of the people that were abiding by this and wearing their masks. So I think once we get to a point where everybody, and that's what it's going to look like, and it's a little upsetting and it's a little weird to see everybody wearing masks and kind of being distant. But I had an exchange with the checkout clerk, And she's like, have a good day. And I'm like, have a good day with my muffled, mask. But I was able to still talk to her and
Yeah.
stay, safe distance, and then go on with my day. So once you experience those things for the first time and the second time, and then we get used to that new normal. So the protocols that will be in place in the office about, walking, clockwise around a conference room, or, keeping your distance as you walk through an office, and things like that, they will happen, and we'll figure it out. And I think people will feel more comfortable once we get into those normal things. But it's so hard to imagine, right, what it looks like in real time, because you mentioned in the beginning of this conversation so many things that we do routinely that we don't even think about, touching the elevator button, or even calling for the elevator. um, and that's where technology could help. I know that we've talked about this before: voice activation of certain things, less touch. um, so those types of things are very interesting to me. I think that's where we're going to spend the next few weeks really talking about it. And the good news is, and I don't want to go talk too many tangents here, but there's people, there are companies right now, I learned through recent conversations with my friends from the IFMA chapter here locally in DC. We're doing these happy hours. I think I mentioned to you, I did
Hmm.
another, FM roundtable with them. And the fact is that they're in, especially in our area, I'm sure it's all over, but there are some essential workers that are going into offices because of government contracts, high security clearance. They can't do the work from home thing. So they are actually using some of these protocols now and living it out, staggered shifts, and new disinfecting protocols. Um, and they're doing it. So we could learn from them what's working, what's not. So there's a lot of optimism here. And I think it's just a matter of that mind shift to say, it's going to look different. It's not going to be the same as it was, but we can get back to some normality. How
Yeah,
about you?
no, and
Normality.
that's exactly where my head was. I laid out that sort of scenario to picture what it looks like when Mike walks into the Houston office of iOffice, right? How does
Mm,
he go through the system? And I do it through how I go through the office. How do employees go through the offices? And then what do I need to do as a workplace practitioner for the organization? What do I need to look at that actually maybe we need to come up with a new workplace etiquette? Maybe there's different rules, or how we keep people distances, how we just, and I'm running through my floor plans. Okay, how do I help employees get comfortable? And then, yes, all the things you talked about, right? So how do we, the bathrooms, do we design bathrooms that there is no doors to walk into the bathroom, right? What does that look like? How do we need to eliminate doors within the office so there is no separation? Actually, it is one neighborhood, and actually maybe the open office is a better environment because there's less touch points. So I'm
mm,
thinking through, how do as a leader actually put this in place? How do I provide that information to the executive team to actually say, oh, here's the sort of ways and designs, and technology plays a huge factor. But I think the other factor we need to consider is, it's the workplace culture, right? How are we designing work styles? How do we design how all employees work? And how are we thinking about that? Because there's going to be a changing in the actual physical environment, but there's also going to be a change in the workplace. So perhaps people aren't being placed or sitting in offices as much, but maybe there are certain functions and tasks that can only be done in the office, right? And I'm also thinking, you travel a lot to different businesses. And this is one of the things that Cushman Wakefield identified. And I sort of first thought of it and I thought, I don't understand why we would do this. And this is a certification, right? Certification that you actually do adopt these 6-foot office principles. Because if Mike, you're going to see a customer, you're going to see somebody who how do you know that that business or that office meets those requirements,
mm,
right? How do you get to that? How do we allow customers come into an office to actually allow them to feel comfortable and actually show them that actually we do meet these standards, you will be safe, you will feel safe. And that's where I'm sort of thinking those things through. And then you sort of take it back from a landlord perspective, right? How does the landlord ensure that for all the tenants coming into the space, that they ensure the protocols in the lobby of the building, everyone's happy with? Will we be more open to biometric or facial recognition, right? So we come to the gate, or the turnstile, whatever it's used in different offices, that actually we're prepared to sign up for this now because we don't have to touch a button, right? Audio, like you said, but cleaning protocols, right? How does the landlord show that certain protocols are being met? Deep cleaning, hot desking. Is hot desking gone? I don't think it is, but again, it's like these are all the questions to sort of go through, and that's why, you know, I I sort of went through this emotional roller coaster as we've been
Yeah,
talking about is as I read the article, and it's so thought provoking. I think it's really interesting.
it
And
absolutely
yeah,
is. Yeah.
yeah,
I was going to say, but I want to get to the personal side of this and how you're processing it individually, because I think there's a lot of great articles we can point people to, and we'll keep talking about some of the specifics as things rise up and we start actually seeing them implemented. It'll be interesting to say how are things going, but you bring up some interesting thoughts that I think are unique in our country compared to others. I think we've discussed this a little bit, but the idea of privacy and also the ability or giving up certain rights and private, face recognition, things like that. They trigger these
mhm,
thoughts, especially in America, because we have such a strong kind of history of distrust of authority in a lot of ways. So we are hesitant to give central authority information about us and take away our liberties, right? But when times of crisis come up like this, we are more open to these types of things. It happened after 9/11, it'll happen here. So I'm curious to know your thoughts, being that you were born and raised in the UK. And is it a different mindset? Are you really comfortable, sharing a lot of that location information, personal information, maybe more so than someone who was raised in the heartland of America and has a kind of a suspicion of the government? And do you see any signs in today's environment when you start seeing some of these decisions being made and some of the discussions happening? Have you tuned into any of that, or is that some of that sound strange to you, as far as people saying, I don't even want to be told not to stay at home? And we had a little conversation about this, but there's some people that, are suspicious of even like stay at home orders, and things like that. How do you think we navigate those waters in this kind of unique American culture? Or do you have thoughts on that? I'm curious.
no, it's a great question, and you're framing the question, and my mind's going, "Whoa, this is how long have we got?" Right? Because there's so
Yeah, we
many
got 8 minutes
tangents to
left
go
today,
off in
but
this, you know. Um, but what I will say, and who knows, right? Who knows how this will impact? But if we look at history, right? History is a good predictor of the future, and if we look at the protocols that are currently in place, let's take in Europe, right? GDPR actually mandates that information isn't tracked, isn't kept, isn't stored. Fingerprinting or things like that, whenever certain security people are onboarded, there are different rules and regulations through different European countries.
yeah,
Um, so I actually think Europe may be somewhat more resistant to it than
mm,
the US. I, I don't know. I mean, all I know is whenever I want to have a look at, who's coming into the office, it's a lot easier to get access to that information in the US than it is in Europe. It is
interesting.
so
Yeah.
hard.
Okay.
And but who knows if that will change the mindsets now? Who knows?
Yeah.
But it's certainly something I'm really interested to see how that does transpire. There are certain countries within Europe that actually their regulations are the work teams. When I say work teams, they're unions that
Yes.
are
Yes.
are really strong, have huge influence. So it'll be interesting to see. And it again, I think a lot of it's going to be the communication, the narrative around how things are introduced. And I think if things are introduced for the benefit of the individual, then I think people can make a different decision. So I think that's where, and we go back to the iOS and Apple and Google thing, right?
Yeah.
It's all about the narrative. It's all
Right.
about, how do you make social responsibility? How do you embrace social responsibility for yourself? But then it's on those organizations to, you know, keep people comfortable in how things have been done.
So the things that we've always talked
What
about
about
way
you, man? What?
before the pandemic:
Uh,
communication, sharing the vision. What is the value proposition? Why do we want to do what we want to do? It's just such a fundamental. Explain it to people so they can't fill it in with the conspiracy theories and the power grab worries and the control and the shift, all those things that we worry about. So let's make it very clear, and then also provide different options, flexibility for different people, individuals, organizations, geographies, so forth and so on. So I'm so excited to see, hopefully, that we'll see some great leadership come through I'm so, again, impressed by some of the articles I read about, you know, HR and corporate real estate, and just CEOs having to make these decisions and be, and so many, you know, my own company has done this so well so far. And I know that there are others have done well. And your experience has been a good one, where they've taken this crisis situation and just put people first and empathized with situations, and just try to account for so many different scenarios. And that has to continue, that kind of, you know, culture of caring and putting people first to get us to a comfort level. And it would also communicate. We need to have people communicate and get the data out there as far as what are the real risks of going back into a public place. Because I do want to go back to Disney World, and I do want to go back to the movies, and I do want to go
Yep.
back to concerts, and hanging out with groups of people, baseball games, going to sporting events, arenas. And I want that to happen sooner than later. Again, I don't want to be foolhardy about it, but at the same time, I've always been a guy who calculates risk in all scenarios, and we've touched on this before. Give us the data we need to say, you know, this is the risk. It's not as high as it seems, because we've been so hyper focused on the spread of this disease, the daily scorecard, sadly, of infections and deaths and hospitalizations. And we've put it in, I think we've done some good things, but we've also maybe done a disservice to the people out there, to scare them so much that there's going to be a real difficult time. That mental mindset, that well-being, that ability to feel comfortable. And I wonder if as we get, you know, go forward in these coming days, if you'll hear information that'll help make you feel more comfortable going back out into public sooner than when there's a vaccine a year from now. I just want to make, I gotta think that that's got to come into play for so many people. And it's going to be hard, because we've done a real, you know, number on people's mind. And many people don't dig deep into articles like we do, and don't listen to the news. They hear glimpses of this and that. They hear the reports that are the scary reports, because that's what the news does to get your attention. And
Mm.
and there's some there and it's a balancing act, because there are things to be scared of for sure, but we can't live life scared. And that was last week's quote of the week from my friend from Australia, who now lives in New York City, Christina Herrera. She said, you know, a life lived in fear is a life half lived. And I
Hmm.
just want to make sure people can feel comfortable getting back into some type of normalcy. I'm going to use normalcy again, because that's my favorite version of that word, but get back to a normalcy where we can. And again, what about this? And there's a lot there you probably have thoughts on for the last minutes here. I'll leave it to you to decide what to say, but the idea of just hugging and shaking hands with people, you know, when we go to these conferences or go back to work, you heard Dr.
It's oh,
Fauci say that we may need to stop
yeah.
shaking hands, and that may be a good thing for the culture. But what do you think about that?
Mike, when I go to a conference and I see you, I'm not supposed to hug you, not supposed to
How can
shake your
that
hand.
be?
I'm not, you know,
Right.
how can we do that? You know, it's just such a natural thing within us. You know, you think about the European community, how they greet each other. You know, that's a huge shift, huge shift. So who knows where we're going to go? But you know, as we wrap up here, there's, you know, I'm reminded by what you've just articulated, you know, by my good friend John Schultz. I keep getting his surname mixed up. So Jonathan Schultz, videos and open source workplace, trust and
Yes.
transparency, trust and transparency. Those are the two things that we need. And everyone, if everyone operates and feels and moves with those two words, with those philosophies, with those emotions, I think then we're all going to be in a great place. So as we wrap it up here, look, please do subscribe, like, share
Yeah.
this. Let
Reach
us know
out.
your comments. Let us know your questions. Engage with us. You know, let us know what you like, what you don't like, and just don't tell us you don't like the show, because
we
otherwise we've got nothing to talk about, or we could have this chat and no one will listen. But
we have a
you
lot
know
to
what I
talk
mean.
about, and I know we
Yeah.
will continue to have so much to talk about. That was one of the fears going into this daily live stream, was
Oh my
what will you
goodness.
talk about every day? I couldn't even scratch the surface of what I wanted to tell you after a long weekend. So we'll do it again tomorrow, Steve.
Save here.
All right.
All right, man. Take
See you
care,
soon.
Mike. Be well.